What does it take to get beyond the damage of words? I'm Katrina Collier. Join me each week as I explore what it takes to step into a happier future. My guests are sharing their stories of when they realised that they needed help and what it took to take that first step, so that you leave inspired and maybe even start on your own path to self-love, care, compassion, and of course happiness. So without further ado, let's hear their stories. Caroline Ferguson, welcome to Beyond the Damage of Words podcast. I'm still giggling because we were obviously mispronouncing your name before we came on air, but more excited. You are, of course, my favourite sensitive upstart, so I had to have you on. So thank you so much.
I'm just so
It's
chuffed
so
to be
fun.
here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I talk about high sensitivity so much through the book, so I can't wait to dive into this conversation. But first and foremost, like, what led you into starting to work on yourself, to starting to heal, to starting to explore all these things? Was there a moment? Was there a...
Well, yeah, I guess there was. It was, I had this kind of itch for a very, very long time that I just felt, I was born for something more. And I didn't really know what that meant or what it was. I just kind of assumed that it was about writing because I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to write stories, I wanted to write screenplays. And then one day, lo and behold, I find myself as paid staff writer with a production company. And I thought, yay, I've made it. But actually the feeling was still there. That itch was still there. But at that point, I decided I really had to take it seriously. And then there was a moment which was on a train on my birthday. This is a story I tell quite frequently because it was such a moment for me. It was October. It was about 7 or 8 at night. I was on this train. It was a rainy, dark night. I was on my way back, commuting from work.
October in England, I can feel it.
Oh, Lordy. And it was my birthday, and I was late for my own birthday dinner party that my cousin was throwing for me. Oh. And it was just grim. I'd had a grim day, and we won't even talk about menopause, but it was all of that. And I was on my way back, and we basically ran over somebody on the line. And I was in the front carriage, so there was a dead person under the wheels of the train carriage that I was in. And we had to wait on that train for 3 hours before they could get us off. It was an 8-carriage, crowded commuter train with standing room only, and they had to bring us off down a ladder at the back. And there were people in that front carriage that were grumbling and moaning about how inconsiderate it was for some.
See, strangely, that's where my head went. That's such an England thing, though. When you've lived here, you do get pretty annoyed that they do it in peak hour, but at the same time, I do feel the empathy. See, I get it. I get the two sides of how one would feel in that moment.
And I was on my way to my birthday party.
It is an England thing. I'm sorry, it's an England thing, listeners. There's just too many, unfortunately.
It was grismal. And I had a bit of a cry because I was just thinking, somebody is not going home tonight. Somebody's son or child or daughter or husband or whatever is not going home tonight. And I had a little bit of a go at one man who was particularly, unempathetic about the whole thing. But after that, I realised, I never did make my birthday party, of course, but after that, I realised that actually that voice in my head that had been telling me for decades that I was born for something more, I just needed to listen to that, and I needed to find out what my more was. And it turned out, much to my great shock, that it was training to be a therapist, which had really not even been in my head before that. But once that idea arrived, I acted on it really quickly, and I went off to therapy school to train to be a cognitive behavioural hypnotherapist. And making that decision as rapidly as I made it, as completely as I made it, and starting the training a couple of months later, I realised it was just this massive pivot point in my life. And it was the single most important thing I've ever done for me, because never mind for my clients subsequently, but training and learning the skill, the most important life skill, I think, of self-awareness, was absolutely the most healing thing I did. Because I always used to think, if you said, stick your hand up, people who think they're self-aware, I'd have gone, oh my God, yes, me. But actually, I really wasn't. What I was self-conscious.
There's self-awareness, and then there's self-awareness.
Well, one of the alternatives is self-conscious, and that's what I was.
Yeah.
And self-awareness is really about getting to know yourself in depth, absolutely to your roots.
Say that again, self-conscious versus self-awareness. Can you explain that for a second? That sounds interesting.
Yeah, so this came out of my mouth when I was doing a corporate talk, and there's this wonderful woman called Tasha Eurich, who's an organizational psychologist, I think she is, and she is obsessed with self-awareness, and she's written the book, literally written the book. It's called Insight. Go and read it. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I had just been doing some reading around self-awareness, and really it's about understanding yourself in detail, what it is that moves you, what triggers you, where all that stuff has come from, what you value, your values, not the ones you've dragged up behind you. And it's also about having this realistic,
the ones behind the masks.
Yeah, it's about having this realistic view of how the world sees you as well. And only, according to her research, if I go into a room, and I always do this during a talk, I say, hands up everyone who thinks they're self-aware. And I'd say, 3/4 of the people in the room will be looking around going, huh, is that, and I have to say to them, well, that's admirable that you think you are, but actually the facts are that less than 15% of you are truly naturally self-aware, which is incredibly inconvenient considering it's the most important life skill.
It really is.
and I would have said, yeah, I was one of those, but I really wasn't. So when I was in this room, I was saying to people, and then somebody said, so what are the rest of us? And it just came out, self-conscious. And then it's sort of, went around the room, and they all went, oh my God, it is true. It's true.
Yeah.
So self-consciousness is really about having this obsession with how the world sees you and this sensitivity about how the world sees you, and this paranoia about how the world sees you, and all the troubles that causes. You just have to look at teenage girls, this massive self-consciousness and the damage that could cause, because it doesn't go hand in hand with self-awareness.
No, and actually, to me, it sounds like me when I had self-hate. I was very self-conscious. And then when you do become, like you're saying, you unearth all of the stuff and you start to love all of your stuff about yourself, cellulite, warts and all, actually, then you do become much more self-aware, because you do notice your impact on other people.
You do. And the fantastic thing I always say to people is I am living
awkward moment in the room, though.
Yeah. But it's helpful, because when people realize that and they own it, they admit it, it's like, oh my God, she's right. And of course, the other alternative is self-focused, which is slightly different as well. But what we want to be is self-aware, and we can do the work. There are ways that we can learn how to do that, and it is a lifelong path for me. I have moments every day or every week where I think, "Oops, just learned something new there." File that one away.
What you've just said, I've also was just speaking with Lynn Hanford Day about. Then you have the self-compassion, like, oops, actually, I didn't react the way I'd like to have. What was that about? Was there a trigger? Was there this? And then you start being curious, don't you?
Absolutely. And self-awareness can be the start point for all of that. Yeah. When you know yourself better, you can accept. Self-acceptance comes, and then we've got compassion that follows, and curiosity as well, because curiosity is the opposite of judgment. Huge. So foster that compassionate curiosity is by hammering into people.
Well, and it's being aware enough as well of the voice, the dialogue in your head, isn't it? Like, what are you saying to yourself in that moment when you should be being kind and compassionate? So you're sitting on this train and you're having a typical highly sensitive moment.
I was.
Where you're crying for the poor soul that's been lost and the family.
I was bleeding down there on the track. And
I'd have been doing both, by the way. I'd have been irritated and having a cry. Like, I would have been doing the two. When did you discover your high sensitivity?
It was in the first few months of my training, actually. We had this lovely lecturer who came in and did a session for us about something. And she's talking about something, and then she just sort of threw out there in a really casual way, oh, but of course I'm a highly sensitive person, and then it just carried on talking. And my little monkey... No, well, my little monkey was going, ooh, I'm a highly sensitive person, get me, and it was just judgment. It was judgment, pure and simple. And then I felt slightly ashamed of myself. So So I shut up, but it sort of stayed with me, that moment, because I also thought, how ballsy of her to just say that, because it's not something to be proud of, you know.
No, because there's sensitivity shaming. I talk about that in the book too. It's rife.
And a couple of weeks later, we had another of our tutors, an absolute goddess, Maggie Chapman. She was just my heroine. We were doing a role play, and I was playing the role of the therapist. And it's really interesting when you become a therapist. When you wear that hat, you become a therapist. It's really interesting. Whereas when you're role playing the therapy, all of that goes away. That wisdom goes away. So there I was playing the therapist, and one of my fellow study people, learners, was the therapy, and he revealed something as a result of the role play we were doing that none of us had known, and that was shocking. A moment in his life that was shocking. And after a pause for me to ask whether he was okay and wanted to continue, he said yes. He just seemed, relieved, unburdened, and we continued. And at the end of the role play, it was like, whew. And Maggie said to both of us, well handled, both of you. Are you okay? And we both went, yeah. And she said, right, Caroline, you go into the therapy's chair. I went to that chair and I immediately burst into tears. I thought I was okay, but I really wasn't. And I just burst into tears. And then Maggie said to the class, I'm sure Caroline won't mind me saying, that she's a textbook example of an HSP, absorbing all of that feeling and feeling all of that stuff. And then I said to her, Joy mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, and I sort of wrote it off, but I sort of remembered it. Now I need to find out some more about this. So I went out and I bought the book, and of course it was just like a homecoming. It was absolutely like a homecoming. Apart from this one thing that kept recurring, where they say that HSPs have a tendency to, because we're all different, but have a tendency to be much more cautious than other people, much more risk averse. And I was going, huh? I don't recognize that bit,
I don't recognize that bit either.
I rode motorbikes.
We bonded over this though, didn't we?
Exactly. And then there was a page in the book that referred to high sensation seeking and the fact that 30% of HSPs are also high sensation seekers. And
it's such a contradiction as well.
It is. And there's that push me, pull you thing going all the time about, I'm so, I need to just stay safe and calm and understimulated.
But then I need to go see new things.
But then I need to get on my motorbike. Yeah, exactly. Then I need to try something new.
I want to go see something new. I don't want to stay here. I'm in a rut.
And it's new, intense and varied experiences of what the sensation seeking part is looking for. And then the sensitive part, although, yes, we've got this rich inner world and this vibrant imagination that can wander all over the place. You actually put us in these situations. It's like, hold on. I'm not sure
I know, it's quite amazing. So we should explain the contradiction, shouldn't we? So my understanding, highly sensitive people, it is a genetic trait and it's about 15 to 20% of the population. And basically all our senses are above the normal range. So we hear stuff, feel stuff, smell stuff, see stuff, Claire, I'm trying to think, but more than the usual person.
It can be. And it's technical.
Actually, my friend's on sensory.
Taste. Oh, yes, I'm a super taster as well. The technical term for it is sensory processing sensitivity. So it's everything that we process through our five senses is heightened.
Higher.
And everyone, again, is a bit different, but there are certain abilities, I suppose, and features that commonly crop up. Not everyone will have all of them, but I think the most important one is the ability to notice and observe what's going on through multiple channels. So we're seeing it, we're hearing it, we're smelling it. And we notice things at this micro level of detail, this subtle level of detail that other people don't see, which makes us incredibly valuable at work because we can spot things and make, spot patterns and themes before they become real problems. And another thing is this vivid inner world and this rich imagination, which means we can solve those problems because we can come up with ideas and solutions that other people might not see. So we're brilliant at that. But we do have a tendency with all of that noticing and observing and kind of processing at depth, it can overwhelm us. It can overload us from a sensory point of view, from a central nervous system point of view. And I tend to talk about in terms of like each of us humans has this bucket of stuff that we can tolerate in a day. And with us, we start with our bucket half full. Our bucket's already half full.
That's not good, is it?
And when it overflows, when there's too much going on, it overflows. We don't always behave terribly well. I get a bit snappish, and I need to get myself away from that situation because we need to calm our nervous systems down. We need to let the level in the bucket drop so that we can just deal with ourselves, deal with life. So it's so many gifts, but it has some challenges.
Oh, it is so many. I mean, it is so many gifts. I use it in so many different ways. I think actually that problem solving, our ability to see 6 different solutions to a problem like that is just amazing.
And people say, how do you do that? And you think, I don't know, I just do.
I don't know. And also I didn't realise, I mean, it's not a neurodivergence, but in a way it is, because we are born with different brains.
Yeah.
But it's I love it. I love it. The more I understand about it, but I just wish people didn't shame, like when people spray their deodorants and I react, or I walk past someone with perfume, I'm like, oh my God, and unfortunately that's our world. And I just wish people would stop shaming. So once you discovered that, how did that help you as far as, you obviously studied it. I've had you talk about it, but it's that.
I did, yes. I realized that the understanding that I was a highly sensitive person and that it was genetic, it was wired into me. It just gave me a massive understanding and a massive compassion for my past self, for everything that I'd been through. I went to boarding school when I was 9 years old. That wasn't any fault of my parents. My dad was a diplomat. They didn't have decent schools in half the places we were in. So, but when you send a very sensitive small child away from home, it was damaging.
Hard.
It was damaging, yeah. And the toughness that I had to learn has stood me in good stead. But I think there would have been easier ways to learn that. It was very difficult.
And as a lot of the work you've done been on that, like going back to that inner child and healing? And
yes, I did. I have been back to her. I've done quite a bit of work there, but I found actually that developing self-awareness and having an understanding of how I've got to who I am and how I got here helped with that anyway. It just helped with that anyway, because one of the keys to self-awareness, and also to the work that I was studying, cognitive behavioural hypnotherapy, it was a form called rational emotive behaviour therapy, and it's really based around our beliefs. Now, I tend to call those our stories now. So I talk about stories, and the most important story in the world, the most important question in the world for me is, what's the story I'm telling myself right now that's leading me to feel like this?
Yes.
Because that helps you to unearth the belief that you've got about a situation, but also to understand that it's that belief that's driving your emotions and driving your feelings and driving what you're doing and not doing. And when I learned to
and it also makes you take ownership, doesn't it?
It completely does. It makes you accountable for your own feelings. What's the story I'm telling myself about the situation that is leading me to feel like this? And when you can tune into what I call the inner radio, which is broadcasting all these stories, our self-talk, when you know how to tune in and challenge that story and change that story,
amazing.
It changes everything.
Everything, yeah. Because you move from victim to, hang on, I have some control here.
Agency.
I'm playing a part in this, and then, well, what shall I change to get a different outcome?
And I talk to my clients about this, and they say, you mean I've been doing it to myself? And I'm going, yeah, but that's really good news. It's really good news, trust me. Yes, we've been brutalizing ourselves. But the only thing we can change is us.
Yes. But that leads so perfect into what I like is a theme throughout the book. So the book is The Damage of Words, and obviously this is beyond, because I want to talk to people who've got beyond the damage. But we take the words that we heard that were potentially damaging, and then replay them. Like you've just said with your clients, it's suddenly gone.
Yes, we do.
I did for 2 decades. You know, I just.
Yeah, because
well, actually, probably longer, because I probably did it in my teens as well. So, probably 3 decades.
We don't know how not to. No. And the thing about self-worth is that it has its roots in the messages we absorb from childhood and the treatment we receive in childhood. Absolutely no doubt about that. But as adults, we perpetuate it because we don't know how not to. And I have people that come to me to say, I need to sort out my self-worth. I feel really, really bad about myself, and I'm constantly criticizing myself, and I feel so unworthy and not good enough. And so, we take that on, we start doing the work, and then, a couple of weeks in, they're saying, when are we going to do that bit? And I'm saying, well, the thing about that bit, the self-worth as adults, is it's not a cause. And we have to, it's a consequence. We can't slap a Band-Aid on a consequence. Sending you to a nice spa and telling you to speak nicely to yourself is not going to do it. What we have to do is go
get through the years.
Yes. And the metaphor I use, I really need to find a new one. It's like you go into the kitchen every day and then the floor is wet, and so you're always mopping this floor to dry the floor. But the problem is not that the floor is wet. The problem is that the radiator's leaking.
Yes.
You have to fix the radiator. And the radiator's the story that we're telling ourselves.
Yeah.
As a consequence of which we feel bad. And the nature of those stories is going to be around perfectionism, around need for people pleasing and need for approval, around a desire
which are
for
all
certainty.
leading to burnout.
Absolutely.
All these people burning out. It's all back to the leaky radiator.
Absolutely. So that's what I do really, is I help people to. I'm a plumber. I help people to identify the problem with the radiator and help them to fix it.
But I assume that a lot of that is healing a lot of trauma.
Oh, it absolutely is, because when you can develop that self-awareness and you understand yourself so much better, and you have that compassionate curiosity, and you have the tools to think in a healthier, more flexible way, then you can start healing, because you've made some changes. Because you can't fix it. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. You can't just fix it by wishing it or by trying lots of stuff that's all about dealing with consequences. You have to go back to the root. You have to go back to the root.
You do. So when I hear that, I think of, no, don't say her name, someone very close to me in my life who won't look at our childhood trauma. I think I just gave it away. But anyway, I totally gave it away, but she'll forgive me, because she thinks it's ripping the lid off Pandora's box. And I think that's almost like, I want my self-worth like this is almost like ripping the lid off, but you can't. I mean, you can't do that, can you? No,
you can't do that. You can't do that. And the thing is that what's actually preventing people from ripping the lid off the box is fear. It's all about fear of losing control, because what's in the box will be so overwhelming and so overpowering that it will beat us, that we won't survive it. And if we've got the right kind of help, not only do we survive it, but we move past it.
Have you usually found, when you've walked through and you've had numerous clients and you've walked through this, and I'm still thinking of my own experience, the box was actually decidedly smaller than I thought it was?
Yes.
And I had piled so much stuff on it in my head. Is that quite
Remember
common
this
as well?
rich, vivid imagination of ours?
Oh, yeah.
We can imagine stuff.
Mega big.
Absolutely. And fear is a really powerful emotion.
Yeah.
A really powerful emotion. Anxiety is this sort of root of all of that. And it makes things bigger and deeper and stronger than they actually are. So if we can kind of shine the spotlight on the stories, what's the story I'm telling myself that's leading me to feel like this? It's leading to this fear, to this anxiety. When we shine a spotlight on it, it kind of withers up and becomes this smaller
thing,
ugly, broken thing, rather than this massive, all-conquering, all-powerful thing that can destroy us. We have to shine that spotlight on it, and we have to challenge it, and it takes its legs out.
Yeah. How do you know? So I'm going to ask you a different question to what I was going to ask, because I think you've already given the advice and the reassurance to people that it's not, you're not ripping a Band-Aid off. And I cannot make that. And I'm sure that's what prevents a lot of people from taking a step because of that.
I think it does. But one thing to mention before you ask the question is that we need to do that work with somebody who knows what they're doing, with somebody who's trauma informed, because trying to do it yourself can lead to a lot of self-medication with all sorts of stuff to try. We just don't know. We don't have the tools to handle it. We don't have the knowledge. We don't have the experience. And having someone in your corner who does is absolutely invaluable. But it's really important that you have a relationship that is trusting when you go and you decide to work with a therapist or preferably a therapist that's trauma informed, not a coach, because they don't have the, they're not equipped to deal with these
unless they've done the two. So I was quite lucky. So mine first had done both sides and also had her own experiences and her own healings.
Absolutely.
But again,
it really
I also
helps
think
to
a lot
have
of it's
someone to hold our hand
referral, isn't it, as well, a lot of the time. Like, ask your network, who do they know, who they and why, what drew you to them.
Absolutely.
But on the flip side, how do you know then when a client is ready to even start the work? Because sometimes they must make an approach and you must think, is there
I learn pretty quickly. The first session that anybody has with me is what I call the story session. And it's a minimum of 2 hours where they tell me their story from cradle to now. How they're going off into health, into family, into relationships, into work, into trauma, into experiences. And it's very rare that we have a chance to just talk about ourselves for 2 hours to somebody who's interested and sympathetic. And that session is in itself really therapeutic, because I've got so many clients who, during that story session, they're kind of going, oh, hang on, that sort of repeated that pattern there. And maybe that, came out of that, and they're already making connections because they've never had that opportunity to do that before. So they're being their own therapist, really. And once they start to be able to see those connections and those consequences, it's like, right, I know what I'm dealing with now. It's got more of a shape. And while they're telling that story, it gives me a really good opportunity to listen to them and to observe what's going on for them. And it's very hard for someone to stay hidden during that session.
They're also showing that willingness to start connecting dots. And I think that's some of it, isn't it?
Well, the first therapeutic decision is the choice to work with somebody. It's when you decide, right, I am going to sort this out with someone's help. And that sends a huge positive message to your own, your own mind, your psyche, your inner child, that, right, we're on this. We're going for help. The cavalry's coming.
Off. Here we go.
Yeah. So that's the first positive step. And then that story session where they start to see, this isn't so ungovernable. It's not so unmanageable as I thought. There is a shape to this, and there is a person here that's going to help me with this.
Yeah. And I think it's when you've got that trusted partnership.
And there are times where I have actually said, but there are times very quickly when I have actually said to somebody, right, you're not ready for coaching at the moment. You really need deep therapy. And I don't do that work mostly anymore. I send them off to somebody who does, to somebody who is really deeply trauma informed. And then I say, come back and see me when you've kicked its ass. And then we'll work on the coaching. We'll work on who you're going to be when you grow up. Yeah.
No, I agree with that, because I've actually worked with business coaches, for example, who I could tell wouldn't have been able to deal with my complex PTSD and, that real childhood trauma.
And you have to be really honest about it. You have to be, it's not about my ego. It's about what works, what's good for you, for the client.
As HSP, there's no way you want to not help people as well. So we just couldn't. We'd feel the consequences. We genuinely feel them.
We do. And we have to recognize that compulsion sometimes for what it is, which is inappropriate sometimes. We're not the right person. We're not the best person for that person now. So
sometimes it's such a great feeling, though, when you admit that. And they always come back as well, or they'll refer you other people, or, because you've been honest and that sort of a thing, which is great. Absolutely. And what about, so just if you were to look back from the person that started working on yourself and the person now, what would you say the difference is? Like, do you feel lighter or happier or grounded, or what's been the biggest?
I feel I have this incredible peaceful sense of self-acceptance and self-compassion. And that doesn't mean I'm not tough on myself occasionally. I still give myself a good.
You're still human.
But it's just incredibly peaceful to not feel any shame, and to not, because I cry a lot, and in fact, I don't cry nearly as much as I used to, because I'm no longer trying not to cry all the time. Whereas, I used to be, I'm fighting, don't cry.
I can cry at TV advertisements. I can literally be not crying and then crying 1 minute later. I can watch a reel and cry in the space of 30 seconds.
But I really enjoy that kind of crying now. It's
it's just a bit of energy. Who cares?
It's when you're at work and you're doing you've got an advertising agency pitching to you, and they've shown you this little video as part of their work thing, and the lights come up and you're sobbing. Oh, the shame. So I just don't have
actually
that
shows you how
anymore.
brilliant that advertising campaign is for the
really
20%
good.
of the population. We're
really
going to totally
good.
feel it.
It was really good. It was. If I tell you about it, you'll be crying too. It was so good.
Yeah, don't. God, no. This is a happy podcast
baggage
with a really
handlers.
depressing name, but it's a happy podcast.
But so that self-acceptance, and it's so peaceful because I think a lot of this is all to do with having passed the midlife point as a woman
as well.
I think it's sort of built into so many of us, wired into so many of us that we have to look after everybody else. And I know that there are women out there that don't conform to this, but when you feel that, certainly as I did with my approval addiction, that I needed to make everyone else's life better at often the expense of my own. And when you kind of get rid of that perspective and it becomes healthier and more balanced, it's just so peaceful. It's so peaceful not beating yourself up and not feeling ashamed for being too sensitive or too vulnerable or whatever it is. And as a result, now that I've stopped needing not to cry and stopped feeling that sense of shame that I used to feel, it's just, I'm so much more self-supporting. I'm so much more just at ease, and accepting of who I am. And I like myself a lot more. So, peace.
It's funny, every time you say the crying, I think of, I was constantly being told I had crocodile tears, but it never stopped me crying, strangely. Considering the words that she hurled at me, that one just never really sunk in. I don't think you can. I think it's a HSP, if you're going to cry, you're going to cry. But I love that you've released the shame and all of it. I mean, it is such a gift, but it is also so tough. And I just, I do hope that for people who read my book or listen to this podcast and aren't highly sensitive, that they give us a break, because we can't help it when you walk past with your strong perfume and we're like, oh my God, or whatever it might be. I can walk past the privet and just be stopped dead and go, oh God, it's like blocked nose. Oh, in the airport, you should see me walk through duty free, straight through with my nose blocked. I have no shame now. I walk through really obviously blocking my nose, so they leave me alone.
I had a job once though that they had this big fabric. It was in a law firm, and I was brought in. It was a weird job. I was brought in, and my boss was immediately sacked, and I was immediately given her job. It was very strange. With genders, I didn't. Yeah. So she had this chair, and this was in the 90s, I think. When do you remember all those really hideous strong perfumes? There was one called Giorgio. Yes. Sorry, Mr. Armani, but it was called Giorgio. And they wouldn't allow it in restaurants because it just, destroyed your taste buds and took your nose off. And she would sit in this big tweedy chair and just go squish, squish, squish. And I had to leave the room. And then, of course, she had to leave. Headache. And I inherited her chair. The first thing I did was like, get rid of the chair. I can't bear it. I can't bear it. So out went that chair. But I could smell her for about 2 months. It was just
I get the worst headaches. And people think you're insane.
I can't think straight. It's just like, I can't think straight. I'm just consumed by this smell.
I had actually really funny experience in on this trip in Texas with the waitress that had really strong perfume. Mm-hmm. And I just couldn't, every time she'd walk over, I'd be like in a restaurant, I don't expect it.
Yeah,
so
you'd think that would be part of her job contract, actually, is that you can't do that.
It's very strange, but you have my empathy on that.
I just want to interrupt you, for 1 second. I've been doing it all the way through. Sorry. And say,
I love interrupting.
You writing this book is such a wonderful and extraordinary thing that you are doing for yourself, but also for all of the people who are going to be helped by this book. Because I think what you're doing is profound and profoundly helpful and cathartic. So on behalf of all of us out there, thank you.
Thank you. Now see, I'm totes emotional. Don't know who taught me that expression. I love it.
I'm joining in.
I get so over. I feel this is my soul path. I feel called. I feel an incredible weight of responsibility to bring this to the world as well. And it has been a fight on a soul level with my mother to write this book. So it's like I'm giving it my all, and I'm coming out of the spiritual closet as well, so it's going to be quite interesting to see how all these people who know me as this logic recruitment person are going, I'm sorry, you'd got what? So but
where's your broomstick?
I know should be off, but I just want to create more healing. I want it to be acceptable. I want people to talk about it and be, do you know what, I'm not okay and I'm going to get some help. and to encourage people to take a step. So, I mean, thank you. Without, people like yourself sharing your stories, it does, it doesn't
You're
help,
so welcome. And the first step, I think the absolute first step is to understand that we deserve it. We deserve that healing.
You deserve it. Yes.
Because when we can't seek help unless we feel entitled to seek help. And we have to be able to give ourselves permission to feel entitled, to be helped and to be whole and to be healthy, and to give ourselves full permission to follow that path. And I think that the reason that so many people don't follow the path is because they haven't given themselves permission. They don't feel entitled. They still feel they're not good enough to even be helped.
Do you know what? That's why I didn't know I was going into therapy. Now I know why. That I needed to. I went to see Michelle because of my career was in what am I doing here?
Yeah.
I didn't go in. And then she went, hang on a second, and realized that there was trauma and complex PTSD and all of that to heal. And it was, now I understand. Because actually, if I'd been, I'm going to go and work on myself, I wouldn't have. So now I understand why I actually almost got blindsided into it. But
it's
because the universe needed me to do this, to bring this book to the world, ultimately.
Acknowledging it,
so
understanding you're entitled to it, giving yourself permission, and then doing the doing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Caroline. I did get that right. Oh God, I was going to say your name wrong then. Caroline Ferguson. That would be Caroline Ferguson. If people would like to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way? If they want to,
they can do it. I'm on Facebook. Podcast. I'm on LinkedIn, and everywhere you'll find me as Caroline Ferguson Mindset Trainer. Yes. So Facebook, LinkedIn, and I've also got a website which is carolineferguson.com.
It's so easy when you named your website, isn't it? Yep. I finally got there. I went all these loops and then just went to me. It's so good.
I have this lady in the States that writes to me about once a year saying, have you tired of your website yet? No.
Okay.
No, not yet. Sorry, Caroline Ferguson.
Whatever. I just keep it.
I'm the real Caroline Ferguson.
She can use one of the other whatevers. You keep your .com. Anyway, thank you again.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Damage of Words. How brave, how vulnerable, all to inspire listeners like you to take a step or inspire others to take a step. Imagine what healing we could create if we normalize this conversation. So please pass this on and of course subscribe so we can do just that. Until next time, thank you.